Chapter 6. The darkness of the night was getting deeper, and the moon was shining as if it were illuminating the narrow and gloomy streets. The moment I touched my metal-handled revolver in my drawer, I felt the cold in my entire palm. While I was trying to put my strong body into my thick and broadcloth uniform like a timid bird, my gaze fell again on the novel Crime and Punishment on the top of my bookshelf. Without much ado, I put my revolver on my waist and, in front of the stained oval mirror, smoothed my wavy hair parted in the middle and placed the wire-rimmed glasses on my nose. I squinted my burning amber eyes under my shapely eyebrows, gritted my teeth for a while, and walked out of the house quickly as the time approached midnight. As the steel cold of the night hit my face like a slap, I realized that my lips were dry and my lungs wanted that bitter smoke. I took out a cigarette from my plate, lit it with my Zippo lighter, and filled the smoke into my lungs with strong breaths. Despite the thick hat on my head, the breeze blowing through my hair strands was making my whole body shiver. When I arrived in front of the headquarters, the honeyfoam light reflecting from the wooden-framed windows had gone out and the shutters were tightly closed. The door of the headquarters was quickly opened, and my friends stepped towards me, putting their heads under their coats. "Have a good night, Pasha." Enver's curved lips under his mustache smiled with joy. "Good night, friends. How are you?" Saysavar looked at each of us one by one with her shining eyes. "We are very well, Pasha. If we catch this Ali Riza before he escapes, believe me, I will be much better." I took my last drag from the cigarette that had shrunk between my fingers, threw it into the snow, and crushed it with my boot. The bitter smell emanating from me disturbed even me. "Come on, friends, let's go without wasting time," we said, quickly disappearing to the end of the dim street that was getting narrower. As I approached Ali Riza's house with every step, my heart was pounding and sweat was pouring down from my forehead, despite the brutal cold outside. While the snow accumulated on the edge of the pavement and on the roofs of the houses with bay windows was melting, we continued to walk with all our determination. While Sesame was breathing heavily with her mouth under her nose, she checked the address written on the paper and, looking at the facade of the pale brown house with its shutters and curtains tightly closed, said, This is Ali Riza's house, my Pasha," he said. Dusty light leaked through the grills of the shutters and fell on the shiny stone pavement. After shaking my head at Sesame, I approached the door with cautious steps and punched the ornate wooden door with subtle punches. I heard the creaking coming from the stairs of the house and the footsteps approaching. My eyes, hands, and feet were shaking, and the sweat from my neck was flowing down to my waist. When the door opened slowly, I saw Servet's worried face in front of us. "Go, Pasha, go. They are coming soon." As soon as we moved away from the door, we quickly went inside and closed the door. "Are you the only one?" I said, checking other rooms in the house. While his eyes widened with excitement, he moistened his dry, cracked lips with his tongue. "Yes, Ralph Pasha, there is only me, but Ali Riza's arrival is near. You go up." While he was pointing at the stairs, I had already climbed the steps. The intense hookah smell mixed with the ink smell inside the house did not escape my attention. While I was excitedly opening the door of Ali Riza's room, I heard a misty voice behind me. "Ralph Pasha, we also want to witness this moment." I turned around and patted Enver on the shoulder. "Of course Ali Riza will not come alone. Wait in the other rooms so that we do not have any difficulties." He shook his head helplessly, his lips pursing under his mustache, and they went to the living room next to the large room, with a fountain pool in the middle. When I went to Ali Riza's dimly lit room, I was looking at his sullen pictures on the wall and laughing. I sat down at his desk and read the text that had just come out of his typewriter in my low voice. "The Ottoman Empire will be resurrected. The Ottoman Empire, which has recently been called the sick man, will regain its former power. It is obvious that we are trying to be divided by some powers, but our empire is only trying to recover. Our Sultan got tired trying to keep this tired state alive and wanted to be alone with himself. Please do not pay attention to the declarations published by the Party of Union and Progress, which wants to sow discord among us. We will hang the traitor commanders for whom death sentences were issued in Aksahir on the sacred rope of the gallows. Dear people of Aksahir, distinguished citizens of this country, may God help us. We want you to know that our Sultan did not abandon you. Our governor did not abandon you. They are always with you. The Ottoman Empire will wave its flag in a stronger form again. Decree of will." While reading the newspaper with the ink still fresh, I felt angry on the one hand and laughed out loud on the other. He still portrayed the cowardly sultan and governor as brave and dreamed that the Ottoman Empire would recover and find its former power. But now the state of the century was finished and in its death throes. As I crumpled up the paper and threw it into the space next to me, without thinking about my lungs, I brought another cigarette to my lips and lit it. While the ash was burning brightly with red flame, I randomly blew out the smoke coming out of my mouth. As the wooden floor shook under my feet, I heard the powerful engine growl of a jeep. The door of the room opened quickly, and I was faced with Servet's worried eyes. "Come." "They are coming, Pasha. May God help you." He put his red fez on his short-haired head and tried to straighten the collar of his snow-white shirt. My amber eyes were shining with the light leaking through the blinds in the dim room. "Okay, Servet. Go out. Don't draw too much attention." At that moment, the jeep of the Italian forces, whose engine was roaring, stopped in front of the door. I watched unobtrusively through the blinds and tulle curtains as Ali Riza got out of the jeep and entered the house with quick steps. At that moment, while I was sitting on the chair below me again, there was movement in the house. Ali Riza started to climb the steps, shouting with his loud voice. Now his voice sounded so close that my heart started beating like it was going to explode. I pulled the cigarette from my dry lips and interlocked my fingers on the table as I pressed the smaller cigarette into the ashtray. The door of the room opened slowly, and he was still trying to whisper something to the person behind the door before entering. When he finished speaking and came in, dragging his bulky body, he couldn't notice me in the dim darkness. "Who smoked the cigarette?" He closed the door, and as I walked in, I swallowed and added, "I drank it." My voice was very calm and clear. Ali Riza became uneasy as he scanned me with his narrowed eyes. The door of the room was suddenly locked. As Ali Riza anxiously turned towards the locked door, I stood up from the chair I was sitting on. "Who are you?" I stepped forward as my boots pounded the wooden floor. "Oh, how shameful. Don't you recognize it? It's me, Ralph." As I turned the oil lamp on the damp and stained wall, the pale, flickering yellow light illuminated my face in the form of a silhouette. He was trying to avoid me with his timid eyes as he took off his red fez. He stroked his thin beard on his chin while placing his embroidered cane next to him. "What are you doing in my room? Is it appropriate for you to run away like this? You thought you were going to make us hang on the rope." I smiled bitterly at his face. She smiled, her lips curling, showing her teeth yellowed from cigarettes. "I still haven't given up on my decision, Ralph Effendi. You will pay the price for the betrayal you have committed against this country. You and all the other Unionists, too." He rubbed his hands as his little eyes narrowed. "Come on, let me go. Don't act. I have work to do." My teeth were clenched together as I clenched my fingers in anger. "No leaving like that. No leaving behind the hearts and homes you have destroyed and destroyed." "Fiat," I said in my sultry voice. "Did you take Fiat to the medical that night?" While straightening the collar of his razor-sharp suit, he pushed the oval glasses on his thin nose with the index finger of his left hand. He frowned as he inserted the index finger of his right hand into the waistband of his bell-bottom-style trousers. "Home." "Yes, dear, the Greeks shot it, so I did my duty to humanity." While his sarcastic voice echoed in my ears, I buried my heart-covered head on his thin nose. As I curled up on the wooden floor in pain, I took off my revolver and placed it on the dresser. "Now we are alone. If you have a problem, tell me, and we will solve it." I stroked my curly mustache and looked into his eyes, which were looking at me with pain. He tried to stand up with his chubby-fingered hands and leaned his back against the wall. Then he stood up with support from his decorated wooden cane that had fallen to the ground. The flickering light of the oil lamp on the wall was reflecting on our faces as we looked into each other's eyes with anger. When he removed his hand from his nose, the blood had thickened and turned black. His hateful gaze was on me as he wiped his nose with the square embroidered handkerchief he took out of his pocket. He swung his fist towards me, but I ducked back and blocked his punch. Hanging onto his red tie on his freshly ironed snow-white shirt, I grabbed both collars of his jacket and punched his cheek repeatedly. While Ali Riza was moaning with his tearful voice, there was a knock on the door of the room. "Ralph Paysom." "Ralph Paysom, are you okay?" As my fist landed on Ali Riza's face, the spaces between my fingers were stained red. "Good. I'm fine, but I can't say Ali Riza will be very well." While the blood gushing from his face from time to time wet my face, he repeated in a whisper-like voice, "Fiat, I'm glad he died. It's your turn." It will come. I stopped punching. My eyes were full of tears and my heartbeat accelerated. I stood up, the blood stains on the wall barely visible in the pale light. The blood flowing from Ali Riza's beard dripped onto his red tie and snow-white shirt. I tied the ropes of my black leather boots, which were gradually loosening, by tightening them tightly. The leather boot was almost imprinted on my leg. I pulled up the trousers of my uniform, which stretched my legs, and slowly raised my knee. As I raised my knee, the boot blows fell on Ali Riza's unrecognizable face. "Pasha, please calm down." Saysavar's voice was buzzing in my ears. I stopped when Ali Riza's breathing sounds became irregular. I leaned close to his ear and wiped my bloody boot. "This country has suffered enough from people like you, Ali Riza." My fingers quickly grabbed the gun on the dresser and pointed it at Ali Riza. He hit his head hopelessly on the ground while his eye under his slit eyebrow was examining me. "You are not a journalist. You are a traitor. Of course, you won't get away with what you did." I pressed the cold barrel of my revolver to his forehead. While looking at me with tearful eyes, he repeated in his misty voice, "Me. Don't kill me, Ralph. I will do my best to have your death sentence dropped." I smiled bitterly as I leaned towards his face. "Do you think the only problem is execution, Ali Riza? You still see us as yourself. Our thoughts are not whether our lives are saved or the rest, no matter what. Let us die, but let this country remain free and sovereign forever." He closed his eyes helplessly and swallowed. I put a bullet into the barrel of the gun and whispered before pulling the trigger, "Farewell, Ali Riza, farewell. It's time to pay for the treachery you committed for this country." As soon as my finger slowly touched the trigger, the smell of gunpowder rose, and the blood splattered from Ali Riza's pierced forehead painted my face. 3 or 4 gunshots were heard behind the closed door. "Ralph Pasha, are you okay?" While wiping the blood on my face with the square embroidered handkerchief I took out of my pocket without making a sound, and putting my revolver in my pocket, I slowly walked to the door, unlocked the door, and opened the door. "Ralph Pasha, you have made me very curious." Sesme's voice was breathy and his face was soaking wet with sweat. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong." Sesme frowned and looked over my broad shoulders at Ali Riza, who was lying on the ground. "Is Ralph Pasha dead?" "He died." "Yes, he died. One piece of dirt is missing from the world," I said while removing the dryness from my lips. As my heartbeat returned to normal, I saw bodies tumbling down the stairs. "Wealth? Is Fortune dead?" Saysavar lowered her gaze and could not swallow. "They killed Servet when they heard the gunshots after you, Pasha." While my eyes were misty, I went down the steps with lazy steps. My boots beat desperately on the wooden steps. I pushed aside the Italian soldier lying on Servet's lifeless body in his white shirt and turned Servet's body with holes in it. My eyes were filled with tears, flowing from the corner of my nose to my lips. I couldn't swallow as I stroked her open, bright and lively eyes. I knelt down and placed my hand right on his heart. "Wealth? Give me your due, okay? I know you hear me. You sacrificed your life for the sake of truth. You sacrificed your life for the sake of unity, otherwise you are a martyr. The degenerate called Ali Riza is dead. Rest in peace, Servet. Farewell, farewell to your big and brave heart." My voice became more and more shaky and tearful. I felt Saysavar's hands on my shoulder again. "Don't be sad, Pasha. Don't be sad." I sobbed inwardly as I wiped my tears back with the back of my hand. "We couldn't protect Servet. We couldn't keep our promise," I heard Sesme's deep voice. "You and Servet both did your best, Pasha. He sacrificed his sacred life for this cause, rest assured. Wealth is now in the presence of God." As I sat up on my knees, feeling at peace, I smiled at his chalk-white face. While I was pushing aside the bloody corpses of enemy soldiers with my leather boots, the smell of corpses mixed with the smell of gunpowder hit my nose. "This smell is the fate of Commander Ralph," I thought to myself. A proud smile appeared on my lips as I took out our red flag from the pocket of my broadcloth uniform. After kissing the flag that I had unfolded, I proudly covered it over his face and repeated it as his peaceful white face became more beautiful with the red flag. "Our country is grateful to you." We stood eye to eye with our friends for a while in the light of the pale and flickering gas lamp. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I was engrossed in the book on my desk, and while my absent-minded eyes were going back and forth between the lines, I was inhaling the pleasant scent emanating from the straw yellow paper. I was excited that overread every line of this novel. The sun filtered through the blinds in a grid pattern and fell on the Fisco in dusty wisps. In deep silence, I heard a pair of boots coming up the steps and coming into the room. While I was taking deep breaths and scrolling through the small, black letters, there was an excited knock on my door. "You can come in," I said, taking the last drag from my orange-bottomed cigarette and blowing the smoke out. Sasevar continued talking, handing me the tray in his hand. "Ralph Pasha, I brought your coffee. Maybe it won't take away your tiredness from last night, but it will ease it." While I was drinking my steaming coffee from the porcelain cup, my eyes fell on the envelope on the tray. As I moved my blinking amber eyes over Sasevar, "Pasha, before I forget, there is a letter for you," he said. While taking a heavy sip of my coffee, I asked with curious eyes, "From whom?" As he put his red fez under his arm, he handed the envelope towards me and his lips curled cheerfully. "It would be better if you take care of it." I quickly placed the coffee cup in my hand on my table and grabbed the envelope. I read the inscription written on it in beautiful handwriting. "To Ralph." Sasevar put on her red fez and walked out of the room quickly and closed the door tightly. As my heart beat faster, I turned the back of the envelope. "Irva," that beautiful name came out of my lips in a whisper. While my fingers were shaking with excitement, I opened the envelope with my embroidered letter opener and dived between the lines with excitement. "Dear Ralph. Hello, I am Irva. I miss you so much. I feel the pain of my heart deeply when you are not with me. How hard it was to be without you. My bitter heart couldn't stand being without you. Spring has come. The sun is shining. There is neither snow nor ice left around here. Where am I? I'm far away from you, but I'm actually close to you. I'm in your heart, Ralph. I am writing this article to you from Thessaloniki. The trees are already blooming. The weather is starting to get warmer. I miss you so much, Ralph. I look forward to the day when I meet you. When the war is over, come to me too, okay? We will rent a house in Thessaloniki and continue our life here. Thessaloniki is also going through turbulent times, but like everything else, that's what's special about it. I hope you read the novel I gave you. I'm sure you'll love it, Ralph. When I see people like you who have not lost their conscience, I understand why I love your heart so much. Conscience actually beautifies love and makes loving special. I want to ask how your novel is going, because I know you will get an answer. Don't stop writing. I told you, you better not stop writing. Because I want to be with you while you write your best novels. I want to caress your hair and look at your brightly shining eyes. I'm sure Axie here is very beautiful. I know how much you love this city. Maybe you won't want to leave, but we'll talk about these after the war is over. My page is filling up. My ink is running out. I want to be with you, hold your hand, and look into your eyes. I couldn't say goodbye, but take care. I miss you so much. Irva. When I came to the end of the letter, my words were stuck in my throat, and I couldn't swallow. While I wiped my tearful eyes with my square embroidered handkerchief, I smiled bitterly with the folds on my lips. Flood. Thessalonica. You are waiting for me in this distinguished city, the beauty of spring, I whispered, folded my letter and hugged the dry ink letter to my heart like an innocent child hugging its mother. After carefully putting it in the envelope, I adjusted my wire-rimmed glasses on my nose. I took heavy sips of my coffee, which was about to get cold and had been forgotten with Irva's letter on the side of my table. After putting the letter in the drawer, I stood up from the chair I was sitting on and took the flickering oil lamp on the wall and went down to the meeting room. While my boots were pounding the wooden steps, my friends waiting for me had quickly gathered up. I hung the oil lamp in my hand on the iron ledge at the entrance of the door. Hello, friends. I walked to the table, trying not to show the redness in my eyes. While adjusting the collar of his broadcloth uniform, Sesmi greeted me with his bright eyes. Hello, Ralph Pasha. Sasevar was looking at the papers in front of her as she invited me to my chair. Pasha. Sir Sasevar? My eyebrows were furrowed, my forehead was wrinkled, and my eyes were sparkling. The flickering light of the gas lamp illuminated the sweat accumulated on Sasevar's narrow forehead. As I slowly sat down on my chair, Sasevar stood up, pushing the wooden-legged chair under him. Ralph Pasha writes in the telegram from Mustafa Kemal, the seat remained vacant after the pro-government Governor Semel fled. Governor Semel Bey prevented the people from organizing by blocking the Kaveh Milli movements in Konya and around Aksahir. For this reason, Hokavebi was appointed as governor of Konya. I trust him for this cause. and I know that he will make the people of Konya active in the national struggle. It is written as new governor, Hajivabi, Rauf Pasha. While a smile of sadness mixed with joy came to my lips, my eyes fell on the flag on the wall. Finally, good news came. May God bless Mustafa Kemal and good luck to our governor in this difficult struggle. As I interlocked my fingers on the table and stretched my arms out on the snow-white cloth, the smell of incense burning on one side of the room wafted pleasantly into my nose. Do you think Hajivabi is good at this, Pasha? I was looking into Enver's eyes. Without a doubt, I heard Hajivabi's name in many assemblies and congresses chaired by Mustafa Kemal. I don't know anyone who can do it better than him. Saysavar examined me with suspicious eyes. Well, Rauf Pasha, this Hajivabi will not hinder us, right? While organizing his union and progress and supporting Kaveh Milli, I sighed deeply. He is never someone who would do this. He is not someone who would leave his homeland and nation in the hands of a few plunderers. While swallowing, I looked into his eyes one by one and said, and this person is a politician who walked with Mustafa Kemal and whose heart was aflame with the love of revolution. While I was crossing my arms on the table, I came face to face with Saysavar. The phone on the small desk at the edge of the table rang with great insistence. As I stood up from the chair I was sitting on, I straightened my curled uniform and fixed my determined eyes on the phone. I sighed in distress as I lifted the phone receiver with my squinted eyes. Hello. I heard a scratching sound that hurt my ears. A voice that was gradually getting better came through the crackling. Hello, Mr. Rauf. Hello. I am Mustafa Kemal. My lips were dry and my heart was pounding. Hello, Mustafa Kemal Pasha. How are you, sir? I heard loud crackling from the phone. I'm fine, Mr. Rauf. I hope you're fine, too. I heard that you killed Ali Riza, the owner of Hukmu newspaper, before the line was closed. Yes, sir. When we learned that he was going to escape to Istanbul with his recent actions, we did what he deserved. I congratulate you. You saved Aksahir, perhaps the country, from a traitor, but the war continues with all its pain. Khan, the voice was gone. We appointed the new governor Hajivabi Bey to Konya, and now you will start a public resistance together with Kaveh Milli. There is no longer a governor who blocks your path, but a governor who will give you the way and lead the nation to a glorious victory. A proud smile formed on my lips as I gripped the phone receiver tightly. Thank you very much, Pasha. May God bless you. He cleared his throat and continued his words with his authoritative voice. Good luck. Let's bring spring to the country as spring comes. I hung up the phone while shaking my head with excitement. Everyone was looking at me with curious eyes. Who is that Pasha? Mustafa Kemal Pasha. All of their faces turned pale and they were speechless with excitement. He said, It's a good thing you killed Ali Riza before he escaped, and talked a little about the new governor. I was secretly happy when I looked at the patterned embroidery on the lace curtain covering the wooden-framed windows. What will happen next, Pasha? While my chair was being set up again, I slammed my fingers into fists on the table. We will continue our struggle. We will make a struggle in which the people are effective dominant. The curled mustache above my lip was sweating. But how will this happen, Pasha? Our people will not give a damn against the enemy forces, and they will put the necessary pressure on them. When I finished my words, Tullet said while scratching his hair that was free from his cap. Will there be armament? I stood up, my lower lip curling, and slowly walked around the hall, while my leather boots were making noise by hitting the wooden floor. Of course, the people we gathered under the name of Kaveh Milli will have weapons in their hands. Since there is a popular resistance, they will fight with what they have, because it has come to this now. Enemy forces plundered many houses in Aksahir and killed people every time they were hit, but the former governor of Konya was pleased with this situation and turned a blind eye, but nothing like this will happen today. The Konya uprising also entered the ring of fire burning in Anatolia. As I stood with my hands in the pockets of my broadcloth uniform, we came face to face with Enver's sharp gaze. At that moment, Enver turned his olive eyes, shining under the gloomy light, to the flag hanging in a frame on the wall. Let our hearts not beat outside your shadow, Pasha. I continued my words without taking my eyes off Enver, as he bent his misty eyes helplessly over the table again. Amen, Enver. Amen. I thought of the students in Kanakyo for a moment. Tarek's brave stance, Fizi's sweet smiles. This piece of land would become a heart with their hearts. Our land could never be an ordinary land. Our land was watered with the blood of lion-like hearts, and it would remain sacred like this forever. In the room that smelled of kerosene, I just stared out the window. All I could hear was the ticking sounds of the clock on the wall. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. While the sun was painting the dawn with a blood-red color, the bitter cold of the evening had already dominated the streets of Ateş. When I left my room, the novel Crime and Punishment that Irva had given me and her new letter were at hand. While slowly descending the stairs, Sesame stood up excitedly from the wing chair in the lobby and adjusted the revolver on his waist and the red fez on his head. As he said, "Good evening, Rauf Pasha," his lip under his mustache curled upwards. "Good evening, Sesame. You look like you're going to say something good." He rubbed his hands and handed me the note with the photo he took from the table in the lobby. "Yes, Pasha, I have something to say. Namik Bey came." I confirmed it by saying, "Aksahir Sultanasai manager." "Yes, Pasha, they are themselves. They brought you a letter and a photograph from the front." At that moment, I was involuntarily emotional. The tears flowing from my eyes dripped from the corner of my nose to my lips. "Oh, right?" I could only say. Sesame smiled and handed me the note. "Only my Pasha said, Commander Rauf should keep this for the rest of his life. Convey my greetings to him." I swallowed hard, wiping the tears from both my eyes with the trembling index finger of my right hand. "I'll keep it." "Of course I'll keep it." I took the letter with excitement and lazily slipped out of the door of the headquarters. While the moon was shining in a silhouette in a corner of the night, I inhaled the delicious smell of roasted tahini halva and freshly ground coffee coming from a Rasta bazaar. Still, I felt like I couldn't enjoy myself while looking at the minaret of a Plixie mosque. I could never understand whether it was war or love. "Maybe you were the one who made this city beautiful." I walked towards my house, crushing the snow accumulated on the stone pavements. The mosque courtyards were empty, the narrow and gloomy streets were left alone. The flickering lights of the pale gas lamps burning in the bay windows were extinguished, and only the lights of the mayas in the mosques and the gloomy light of the moon illuminated the streets. While the moon, appearing as a silhouette in the sky, fell curtain by curtain among the bay-windowed Aksahir houses, the engine sound of the enemy soldiers' jeeps was making the city stand up from time to time. As I approached my house with slow and steady steps, the painful screams of cats fighting under the walls occasionally mixed with the laughter of children coming from houses with open windows. When I opened the door of my red-painted house with brown shutters and threw myself into a dimly lit stairwell, I remembered that I was tired. I took off my coat and my cap and left my leather boots, which had gotten wet in the snow, to dry. With my tired and swollen eyes, I climbed the wooden steps and turned on the oil lamp on the wall, the pale orange light filtering through the tulle curtains and reflecting on the street curtain by curtain. After leaving the kerosene lamp on the table, I slowly placed the thick novel and the letter, which made my palms sweaty, to one side of the table. While my cushioned chair was being set up, my black eyes watched the ceiling silently for a while. I was going back and forth between my homeland and my love, because without one of them, I too would be lost over time, I thought to myself. I crossed my arms over the table as I leaned back towards my desk. When my eyes landed on the letter coming from the Kanakale front, I couldn't swallow and control my tears. My shaking hand slowly grasped the letter. I took the letter opener next to Irva's handkerchief in my wooden drawer and opened the envelope. The smell of wet ink mixed with the smell of straw yellow paper and licked my nose. I desperately took the photo above, and while my heart was pounding, I came across 3 faces smiling at the camera. My heart ached when I saw them in their pale military uniforms, not as students but as soldiers. They hugged each other tightly and smiled at the shutter with all the sincere smiles on their faces. Tariq, Fizi, and Arif. While their young and lively bodies were laughing in their uniforms, it was as if they had never been offended by being soldiers. They even added color to the pale, black and white photograph. While Tariq and Fizi were laughing among themselves, Arif was accompanying them from afar. I caressed the smiling faces in the photo with tearful eyes. Sighing in distress, I took the letter in the envelope while leaving the photo aside on the table. I opened the carefully folded paper and started reading, unable to hold back my tears. Dear Commander Rauf, I am Tariq, one of the students of Aksahir Sultanasai. We are no longer a student holding a pen, but a mimitsik holding a rifle. Being aware of this, and even remembering that we were able to shed our blood for this country makes us proud. Yes, we are cold, sometimes we go to bed hungry, But this country is so beautiful that it is all worth it. You were right again. Our commanders are not like our teachers. They are harder, more brutal. We got used to it, but we could hardly get used to it. The enemy is strong, but our heart is stronger than the enemy. We have worked very hard to be here and to write this letter to you, and we want you to take a good look at the photo inside. You can rest easy by looking at this photo. We will not be able to return. We know this very well. We will never return without sacrificing our lives and blood for this country. Axahir. How beautiful Axahir is now, isn't it, Commander Ralph? While the white quilt is lifted from Axahir, the green image has already arrived in Axahir. Kanakale is also very beautiful Pazum. The blue sea merges with the chaos of green mountains. As children of the steppe, we admired these places. Huh? We're fine. Don't worry about us. Fizi and Arif send their greetings to you. We couldn't see our other friends. They dispersed us. We missed them very much. The sun is just rising. Pasha, here. A painful day for a Mimitsik begins. I don't know when you were reading these lines, but I have to return to the front now. Enjoy Axahir on my behalf, because this will be my last letter to you. We love you very much. Good luck to you in this painful war. Pasha, farewell. Tariq. When I reached the end of the line, the paper in my hand was slowly being thrown onto the table, and I sobbed inwardly, and before I could stand it any longer, I started to cry, covering myself with my arms on the table. While my body was shaking helplessly, my tears soaked the wooden table. After a while, I raised my head and rubbed my eyes, which were red from crying, while the moonlight filtering into the room through the bay window hit my face. While taking deep breaths, my hand reached into my cigarette case. I pulled out a carefully rolled piece of tobacco, brought one to my lips, and lit my cigarette with my expensive Zippo lighter. While I was filling my lungs with smoke and blowing the smoke out, the sound of the night call to prayer was heard from the minaret of the Grand Mosque. I helplessly leaned forward with my misty eyes and whispered through my lips. This city has never liked farewells. After smoking my cigarette with great pleasure in the chair where I was sitting, I slowly pressed the cigarette that had shrunk between my bony fingers into the ashtray and blew out the last remaining smoke between my lips. While the adhan continued with all its beauty, the sound suddenly became hoarse. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It was as if someone had squeezed the teacher's throat. I ran to the window and lifted the windowsill and listened to the sound for a while, but the call to prayer was incomplete. I ran down the stairs, patting my sweaty face despite the cold air kissing my face. Putting on my cashmere coat and cap, I ran towards the end of the gloomy street, which ended in deep darkness. My heart was beating faster and my lips were praying inwardly. When I arrived in front of the Grand Mosque, I saw that the door was ajar. I went down the steps, walked around the fountain, and took off my leather boots and entered the mosque. Muffled voices could be heard from the muezzin's room. "Leave me alone, you bastard. Didn't we tell you not to recite the adhan?" When I opened the wooden door, I saw a blonde-haired Greek soldier jumping on the imam and squeezing his throat. I took him off the teacher by holding him by the back of his neck and punched him hard in the middle of his cheek with my fisted hand. Just as he was about to fall to the ground, I put my elbow on his back and took his breath away, and I took the wooden lectern leaning against the pale wall and hit him over his head, one after the other. I clenched my teeth in anger as the bottom of my foot was painted red. The imam stood up, stroked his throat, and grabbed my arm. Stop, calm down, the bastard is dead." While I was putting the wooden lectern back, which made my palms sweat, I looked up from the blood-stained walls and came face to face with the imam. "Why did he attack you?" My angry gaze hovered over the lifeless body of the Greek soldier. "He came here a few times and threatened me that he would not recite the adhan, but I said I would recite it anyway. It turns out that today, while I was reciting the adhan, he was behind me, and suddenly he grabbed me by the throat and made me stop the adhan incomplete," he said, picking up his skull cap that had fallen to the ground. "You know, they martyred the Imam of Hassan Pasha Amarat Mosque. I had given up hope. A black curtain had fallen over my eyes. You came. You came and saved. May God bless you. May God forgive you to this country." He put his hand on my shoulder while looking at me with his full eyes. All I could say was, "Amen, amen, sir." "What is your name? What do you do?" While swallowing hard, I fixed my parted hair. "My name is Ralph. I am the commander of the Western headquarters. You are the commander who did not surrender to the Istanbul government. Such heroism was expected from you anyway, son. He was already in middle age, some white had entered his black hair. His bright white skin complemented each other with his beard that thinned towards his chin and harmonized with his face. I turned around saying, "Thank you, Haja." Anyone would have done the same, and at that moment, Hajababy Bey's order came to my mind. "Oh, before I forget, you'd better have a gun with you, sir." While his eyes were rolling, he took off his skull cap, which made his head sweat, and stroked his hair. But how does this happen? It is inconvenient for us to carry weapons. I looked directly into his eyes. We are now starting the spirit of Kaveh Milli. It is not enough for the Mimitsik to fight on the front. You, the people, must also be armed, and this will be quite legal. You will kill the enemy soldier who tortures you. No one will be able to harm the honor of this country and nation. He looked into my eyes with pride, shook my hand while his moist lips smiled. "Okay, if you say so, I have full confidence in you. May God help our soldiers and children at the front in Kanakil." I said, "Amen, sir, amen," and walked out of the muezzin's room with quick steps. While admiring the embroidered dome of the Grand Mosque and the walls with verses from the Quran, I rushed out the door. As the bitter cold coming from the depths of the night hit my face like a slap, I had goosebumps. When I came home, I found myself in front of the black typewriter. While my fingers were quickly moving between the keys, lowercase letters were filling the lines. When this brutal war is over, what will remain will be this distinguished novel and our love. When we meet again, I thought to myself. While I was drinking my hot tea along with the novel I was writing, I realized that my eyes were slowly closing and that I needed to rest now. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I was taking deep breaths of my cigarette while lifting up my glasses, which had fallen on the tip of my nose, with the index finger of my left hand. I turned my eyes to the windows of the headquarters. While the building stood before me in all its glory, the light reflected from the windows occasionally fell on the stone floor in front of the headquarters. I turned to Saysavar, who was taking her last breath from her ever-shrinking cigarette. "Did you talk again?" After taking his cigarette between his fingers, Saysavar looked into my eyes with his half-timid, half-curious gaze. "With whom, my Pasha?" "With Maypair," I said, smiling. "We talked?" "Yes, we talked, Pasha." His lips, which resembled a straight line, suddenly curled with excitement. "What do you think? Is the decision positive?" His cheeks were flushed as he threw his cigarette on the ground and crushed it with his leather boots. "Positive, Pasha, positive. Thank you for everything." I patted his shoulder while looking into his eyes with a sincere smile. "What do you mean? Maybe love meant dreaming the impossible for you." While Saysavar was adjusting his red fez on his head, we entered the door of the headquarters. I heard the crackling sound of the stove burning in the lobby, and the sour smell of the orange peels on it caught my nose. He applied a not very strong force to the door handle of the headquarters. No one's silhouette could be seen at the door, only the door was pushed and closed. When I heard a weak voice, I realized that it was a child. "Commander, brother." "Commander." "Commander, brother." While Saysavar stopped where he was and turned towards the door, I opened the door with quick steps. This little boy was none other than Ollie. Her hair was messy and her chubby cheeks were red. His cheeks were red because he came here running. I bent down on my knees, got close to his eyes, took his cold face in my palm and asked, "Calm down, Ollie. Calm down. Did something happen?" He couldn't swallow. His misty eyes stared out the door of the headquarters for a long time. Well, while the sound of Saysavar's leather boots echoed behind us, I continued to look into Ollie's brightly shining eyes. "Take deep breaths, Ollie." Ollie did what I said while pushing back the hair that was covering his eyes and took strong breaths one after the other. "Huh. Now tell me." "Commander Ralph, the enemies of the fat soldier brother." While Ollie swallowed and took a breath, my eyes widened as if they were popping out of their heads. Hearing our voice, Enver quickly descended the steps and started waiting behind us. The enemies kidnapped the soldier and his brother. While I was rubbing his chalky face with excitement in my palm, I hit the wooden floor with my knee close to the ground and asked, "Where did you see it? Where were they taking it?" He looked out again with his googly eyes and pointed with his chubby and short index finger with excitement. "Pink Mansion. I saw them breaking into the Pink Mansion." He spoke slowly, but with a trembling voice. As I get up from my knees, I continue to stroke Ollie's hair. I tapped my fingers together and turned to my friends, who were watching me with worried eyes. Of course, Takasi's mansion. They use it as their headquarters anyway. As I put my hands in my pocket and walked in the lobby with excitement, I was distracted by Enver's voice. Ralph Pasha, what are we waiting for? Let's go and save Sesame. I twisted my lower lip in pain and helplessness. No, we cannot go in daylight. Ralph Pasha is right. We should go at a quieter time at night, because we would risk Sesame's life. We will wait for the night, and then we will save Sesame safely. I can't lose another comrade, an officer. My heart can't bear it. While I was patting Ollie on the back and sending him towards his home, I was distracted by Enver's voice. Pasha. What if they kill Sesame? My lips smiled bitterly as I stroked my curled mustache with sweaty tips. It is not possible. They cannot do this. They will want to learn something from Sesame. They need this very much, especially at a time when they are scattered like freckles. Of course, naturally, Sesame will not tell anything either. I walked up the steps as my determined voice echoed off the walls. My eyes felt sad and my heart felt like it was tightening. I angrily set up my chair, took out my revolver from my drawer, and wrapped my palm tightly around the metal handle of my revolver. The splashing sound of melting snow echoed in the wooden gutters of the headquarters. While I was sitting helplessly on the chair, my eyes were wandering out the window from time to time. While we were waiting for the evening with troubled eyes, it seemed as if the sun would never set, but now the sun was saying goodbye to the day through the snowy hills, painting the sky orange. When I lifted the wooden windowsill, the sour smell from the linden trees hit my nose. I turned back and put my revolver on my waist. The sun had completely set, and the gloomy streets of Axahir were in pitch darkness. As the snow on the roads melted, ice formed from time to time on the crushed stone streets. The sound of the engine of the car we started echoed on the street where deep silence and darkness prevailed, and bright yellow lights hit the dusty road, illuminating our way. When I slowly touched the gas pedal under my foot and moved off, we left a thick smoke behind. While my fingers were tightly gripping the steering wheel, I was distracted by Enver's voice sitting right next to me. Pasha, a little faster, please. While he clenched his teeth under his mustache tightly, the veins in his head appeared as if they were exploding. I put the gear in my hand forward and accelerated. This is the fastest way to go. Let's pray that it doesn't break down. Seysavar, sitting in the back seat, was watching the dimly dark streets without changing her calm facial expression. As we passed through the streets where Axahir houses are located, people were looking at our vehicle with fearful eyes from under the curtains. There is a very painful trauma left to this nation. They no longer trust even the vehicles passing through their doors, I thought with distress. As Takasisler Mansion appeared as a silhouette at the end of the street, I quietly pulled the vehicle aside and turned off the ignition. Let's go down, Pasha. I held Enver's arm tightly, pulling him towards me as he touched the door handle. I maintained all my seriousness by looking into his bright eyes. Enver, your hasty attitude could cost the life of one of our friends. Our friend, Sesame. As he sat back in his chair, he nodded his head as if he agreed with me. I'm sorry, Pasha. Believe me, my heart can't stand it. I want to drown these dirty boots that are stepping on my homeland in a spoon of water. Clasping my hands on the steering wheel, I muttered through my teeth, Don't worry, Enver. The days when we will crush them all are coming soon. But all I ask from you is a little more patience, a little more fortitude. While he was calming down with his calm face, he scratched his head and looked away from me. Paham. Pasha, look, there is a fiery red glow over there. I was distracted by Seysavar's excited voice. As I looked where he was pointing, I saw a small dot emitting an orange hue. Someone is smoking, which means there is someone at the door. As the person standing at the door took puffs from the cigarette, the color was flashing like a riot of light. While I was breathing heavily, the smell of gasoline coming from the vehicle hit my nose. We watched that red dot for a while. The red dot was crushed under a boot as it was thrown to the ground. Smoking. Come on, guys, let's go. We can't waste any more time. Please be careful. We don't know what will happen, how many people there will be. My calm gaze wandered among my friends. Enver was shaking his head while watching the mansion with his eyebrows furrowed. I heard Seysavar's calm voice from behind. It is understood, Pasha. Let's not be separated from each other. I slowly opened the car door and threw myself on the edge of the snow-covered sidewalk. My friends followed me, one by one. My hand quickly reached for the revolver on my waist. When I took the gun out of my waist and put it in my palm, My heartbeat accelerated and the sweat flowing from my forehead wet my neck. When we approached the door of the mansion, we saw that there were 2 Greek soldiers at the door. They were talking, muttering among themselves with their wooden-handled rifles slung over their shoulders. As I held my breath and leaned my back against the facade of a house with a bay window, I heard a bitter wail rising from inside. The noise was so loud that it made even the wooden-framed windows of the mansion vibrate, and it was heard painfully in my ears. "Sesame," I whispered, clenching my teeth tightly. "This is Sesme's voice. I hope what I predicted doesn't happen, Ralph Pasha." While the gun I was holding in my palm made my palm sweat, my bright amber eyes were squinted. "Come on, Pasha, let's go." After putting a bullet into the barrel of the gun, I quickly walked towards the mansion. 2 Greek soldiers saw us coming, put their rifles on their shoulders, and said in a strong voice, Don't come any closer," they shouted. Inver and I pointed our guns at the same time and fired. With the gunshot echoing among the bay-windowed houses, 2 Greek soldiers fell into the snow pile. While curious eyes were watching us from some windows of the mansion, the flickering lights of gas lamps were shining in some houses. While there was movement in the mansion, the wooden decorated door of the mansion slowly opened. While Inver, who was waiting at the top of the stairs, was trying to signal me by frowning, I pointed my gun at the ajar door. Inver quickly jumped down and quickly pulled me aside by my arm. Pasha, please come aside." While we were looking at each other out of breath, Inver and I came face to face. "Why did you do such a thing, Inver?" "Pasha, this is Salt." Sesme's deep voice drowned out Inver's voice. "I'm here, Pasha. I'm here." When I pushed Inver and came out from behind the wall, Sesme was running towards us with his wounded face. As I opened my arms with tearful eyes, guns were fired one after another from behind the embroidered wooden door. The guns that exploded at the door stabbed Sesme's back one by one. While the blood flowing from the corner of Sesme's lips and gushing from his back painted the snow red, he stopped where he was, losing his strength. As he fell to his knees, he was breathing hard with the blood gushing out. His eyes grew wide as if smoke was coming out of his mouth. "Goodbye. Farewell, Ralph Pasha," he said and fell face down on the ground. After shooting the soldier behind the door with the gun in my hand, Seysavar pulled me towards him from where I froze. "Ralph Pasha, please come to your senses. They were going to shoot you too." While Seysavar's chatter was echoing in my ears, I was remembering the scene of Sesme shooting with my absent-minded eyes. Inver and Seysavar were out of breath as they held me by my arms and took me towards the vehicle. While Inver sat at the steering wheel, Seysavar sat in the back seat with me. Inver accelerated the vehicle. We quickly left where we were. "They killed Sesme. They will pay a heavy price for this, very heavy." While watching me carefully through the rearview mirror of the vehicle, Inver continued his words. "This was a trap, Ralph Pasha. They kept Sesme ready because they knew we would do such a thing." His voice trembled and his eyes filled with tears as he spoke. While he angrily touched the gas pedal under his foot, he accelerated the vehicle by shifting the gear under his hand forward. While my eyebrows were furrowed, my angry eyes were wandering the streets of Aksahir, visible as a silhouette from the vehicle window. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As always, the sun rose among the snowy mountains and began to melt the heavy snow masses accumulated on the sidewalks. We started a day without Sesme. My eyes were swollen from crying all night thinking about my friend. While my heart was beating fast, I glanced at the Kavei Mili soldiers sitting at the head of the table. "Hello, friends. You know we have no time to waste anymore. While the enemy is dispersed, we need to finish them off now." They cheered themselves up by martyring one of our comrades, Sesme, last night. But this happiness will be short-lived, no pity. By the order of Governor Hajj of Abi Bey, we are starting the Kanya uprising by making Kavei Mili dominant. The tall, dark-skinned young man sitting at the edge of the table adjusted the rifle hanging on his shoulder, frowned, and continued his speech. "Well, my Pasha, the Istanbul government brought the new power to power. What will happen if we encounter the same difficulty again?" I lowered my gaze to the ground as I crossed my arms in front of me. "We will not think about these anymore. Kavei Mili, the Independent People's Army, has authority as much as the Ottoman army. Our only goal is to not let the enemy know." The tall young man listened to what I said attentively and interlocked his fingers on the table. "It is understood, Ralph Pasha. Tonight we are taking the Takasi's mansion from them. Enver took his hands out of the pockets of his broadcloth uniform while adjusting his red fez on his head. That's right. We took the Western headquarters. Now it's time to take the Takasi's mansion and finish it off thoroughly. I clenched my fingers into a fist, and when I clenched my teeth together, I felt the bitter taste of blood on my lips. While my eyes were burning with the fire of revenge, I muttered, "Let the roses not bloom on the path of migration. Let our hearts not beat outside their shadow. May God help us, lions." Their determined eyes looked into my narrowed eyes as they pushed the chairs under them and stood up where they were sitting. Amen, Pasha. I stood there staring after the young people as they quickly left the headquarters. As the warmth of the burning stove in the lobby licked my face, my eyes involuntarily filled with tears. Losing Sesame after Silüet had left an unhealable wound in my heart. While I was tucking my index finger and thumb into the belt, I wiped my tears with the square embroidered handkerchief I took out of my pocket, and at that moment, Sesavar's weak voice came to my ear. "The other day, Sesame was waiting to give you a letter." "What letter was it, Pasha?" "Unless it's special." While her tearful eyes were wandering over me, she moistened her lips with her tongue. "He brought Namek Bey's letter. The students wrote letters and sent photographs from the front, so he waited for me." My words were stuck in my throat, and I couldn't swallow. Chapter 7. I was sitting at my desk, cleaning my revolver with careful eyes and wiping the dirty glass of my wire glasses. There was a knock on the door of my room with great insistence, and I stared at the door with my amber eyes, shining in the light of the flickering and pale gas lamp. I carefully put the revolver in my hand into the drawer and called out, "You can come." As the door opened timidly, Tullet's bright eyes peered inside. As he took off his red fez from his dark hair, he held it in his hand out of respect. After entering, he closed the door and walked towards my desk. "Sit down, Tullet." His eyes narrowed as he raised his eyebrows. "No, I will not sit down, Rauf Pasha. First of all, I want to express my condolences to you. We lost Sesame last night. Yes, he was our comrade in arms too, but he was a friend you knew better," he said, and almost swallowed the other words he was about to say. "Thanks to my friends, Tullet, I know that he sees us. I know that he hears us. He sacrificed his life for this country. If he sees us standing, he will be ashamed. He will not be able to sleep comfortably," I said, while looking at the flag hanging on the wall of my room. "What do you really want to say, Tullet?" I broke the deep silence in the room by saying, "Rauf Pasha, if you have your permission, I would like to join the uprising in the Takasi's mansion. I waited here last night, but my heart could not bear it. While I was tying my fingers on the long table, I was looking out the window. The minaret of a Plixie mosque reached out as if it was piercing the sky, and the gas lamps burning on the balcony of the minaret shed light on the gloomy night. I sighed and added, "You can come. You can come, but tell the guards below to be careful." When I finished my words, his straight lips curled slightly and his eyes sparkled. "Understood, Pasha," he said, putting on his red fez and leaving my room with quick steps. While the pale face of the moon vaguely illuminated my room, the evening call to prayer was heard from a Plixie mosque. As I stood up from my seat and walked outside, I smiled, imagining the reaction of the Greek soldiers when they saw us. My heartbeat accelerated again as I walked down the wooden steps. Before I put my cap on my head, I smoothed my wavy hair that was parted in the middle and pushed my wireframe glasses onto my nose, stroking my curled, sweaty mustache. When Enver saw me coming, he stood up excitedly from the wing chair he was sitting on, nodded, and greeted me. The worried, intense expression on his face was evident. Without paying much attention, I passed him and crept out of the headquarters. As the gentle breeze caressed my skin, I suddenly felt shivering. When we arrived at the Takasi's mansion, the conveying Millie volunteers were hiding in the dim darkness with the rifles slung over their shoulders. Sesame's pale blood lay where he fell. I looked there for a long time while smiling bitterly. The wind blowing from time to time carried the scent of the linden trees to my nose, and my distracted eyes were distracted by Sesavar's voice. "Pasha, volunteers are ready. Shall we do what is necessary now?" I stroked my mustache and squinted my eyes, which were getting deeper and deeper. "We can't wait any longer. Let's go in." Sesavar ran to the crowd waiting in the dark and gave an order. After a loud crack, several torches lit up, obscuring the darkness of the night. "Oh God," While the shout of a brave young man echoed among the houses of Aksahir, armed men suddenly filled the space in front of the mansion. As the door of the mansion opened, the soldiers coming out were instantly hit by rifle bullets and fell to the ground. I took out my gun from my waist and started shooting. While everything was turning into a bloodbath, the endless darkness of the night was illuminated by the fire of the bullets coming out of the guns and the flames of the torches. While the Kaveh Milli volunteers were proceeding to clear the mansion of Greeks, I entered the house with anxious steps. While the ground was filled with the bloody corpses of Greek soldiers, a strong smell of blood licked my nose. The moonlight filtering through the windows, whose shutters were wide open, was pouring into the rooms in dusty wads. I was sticking my head into every room and looking around. I felt a force on my leg. It was holding my ankle and pulling me towards itself. I pointed my revolver at him and looked at him with angry eyes. "You will die. These places will remain ours." When I opened a solid hole in the head of the soldier who spoke sloppy Turkish, he hung his tongue out and turned his head to the right. As I was taking determined steps, I heard gunshots being fired repeatedly upstairs. My eyes caught the Italian soldier hiding under the stairs, who was going to shoot the first person who came up with the rifle in his hand. "Rauf Pasha, be careful." As he stepped aside at the sound of Enver's voice, the bullets from Enver's gun killed the soldier. Now only the sound of the wooden floor being beaten by boots could be heard, and my face was contorted as I tried to disperse the smell of blood mixed with the smell of gunpowder with my hand. While trying to put the revolver in my hand with nervous eyes, I climbed the wooden steps to the second floor of the mansion. Kaveh Milli soldiers were walking among the lifeless bodies. Their lips were smiling as they looked at the corpses scattered on the ground. "You got this place. We have solved it. Pasha, there is not even one of them alive. We took revenge on our commander Sesmi," said the fat man, out of breath with his lips between his cheeks. I smiled bitterly as my lips curled. "Sesmi's real revenge will happen after the homeland is liberated. This was just a show," I muttered, and they looked at the ground in embarrassment with the rifles they hung on their shoulders. "Simul, the brave-hearted commander of Kaveh Milli, said in a determined voice from under his mustache that had turned yellow from nicotine, "Today we kicked him out of this mansion. Tomorrow we will kick him out of this country, God willing, my Pasha," he said. I looked at his face with proud eyes while patting his shoulder under his pale shirt. Their faces were visible as silhouettes from the oil lamp on the wall. After seeing the corpses above, I quickly went downstairs again. As the wind blowing through the open door filled my nose with the strong smell of blood, corpses, and gunpowder, I had difficulty preventing myself from vomiting. While looking at the pale pink facade of the mansion, I pulled the orange-bottomed cigarette from the cigarette case I took out of my pocket, brought it to my lips, lit the cigarette, and filled the smoke into my lungs with great pleasure. As my eyes dived deeper into the night, I felt strong pains in my legs. This happened when I was very tired, but I didn't mind. I was distracted by Tullet's voice. As I turned back with curious eyes, Tullet was coming towards me, placing his gun on his waist. "Pasha, there is nothing wrong with you, right?" No, I'm fine. Do you have anything?" Then, after Tullet, Enver and Saysavar were coming towards us with clumsy steps. Tullet spoke without taking his shining eyes off me. "We are fine, Pasha. There is nothing wrong with the other friends." While smiling bitterly, Saysavar and Enver also came. "We took it, Pasha, and we destroyed these castles." There was a meaningful smile of victory on his lips as he stroked his curled mustache, the tips of which were sweaty. "They will struggle, and eventually disappear." Saysavar spoke while adjusting his furry cap on his head. "No one can hit my homeland with his dirty boots, that's all." As I took the cigarette between my fingers from between my dry lips, I looked into the deepening night and closed my eyes. The love in my soul had already overcome the beauty of this city. I thought to myself, while imagining Erva's eyes looking at me. When I remembered that I was alone, an unbearable pain came to my heart again. ****. The Supreme State will not surrender to the Committee of Union and Progress. The Committee of Union and Progress tried to disrupt the unity and order of our country by carrying out the Konya uprising. They shed blood in Aksahir by brutally murdering our newspaper's valuable founder Ali Reza Effendi, Commander Nikolaus, Commander Yusuf, and many civilians with him. This order will not continue like this. The Supreme State will not be under your captivity. The Union and Progress Rebellion, which defines itself as libertarian and revolutionary, made a distinction by going against the words of our government and starting riots in many places. We will do whatever we can to keep the supreme state alive under the rules of our Sultan. The so-called Nationalist Committee of Union and Progress, which attacked our newspaper's building and our army's headquarters, will also receive the necessary punishment. Long live our Sultan, long live the supreme state. Judgment of Will, Istanbul, February 1915. My lips were curled with joy as I read the newspaper in my hand. While I was pushing my glasses, which had fallen on the tip of my nose, back into place with my index finger, Saysavar and I came face to face. "Why are you laughing, Rauf Pasha?" While asking this question, Saysavar unintentionally smiled. When their cowardly sultans and governors fled, they were left alone, and when the people revolted, they tried to play their last trump card. But it is very difficult now. This nation knows very well what is what. While looking at the newspaper out of the corner of her eye, Saysavar whispered, "I think Hukmu Arade newspaper wrote this article from Istanbul, Pasha." Yes, they wrote from Istanbul, because they could no longer find the support they wanted in Anatolia. A sweet smile of pride spread across my lips as I leaned back in the chair I was sitting on. While I was sitting with Saysavar, the door of my room opened. The person who stuck his head through the door was none other than Enver. "Rauf Pasha, I am disturbing you, but—" "It doesn't matter. Come." His leather boots were making squeaking sounds as they pounded the wooden floor. He clasped his hands in front of him and did not take his eyes off me. "Mustafa Kemal Pasha is on the phone, waiting for you, Rauf Pasha." As my heartbeat accelerated, I jumped up from the chair I was sitting on and threw myself into the room where the phone was located. The phone's receiver had fallen on top of the scattered maps, just waiting for me. With excitement, I took the phone receiver and spoke with a trembling voice. "Hello. Hello, Mr. Mustafa Kemal. Hello, Mr. Rauf. I wish you a good day." "Good day, sir. How are you?" My eyes, panicking, kept going back and forth to the map. I'm fine. How are you?" His voice sounded messier than ever, but just as strong. While he was saying, "We are fine, Pasha, we heard your voice, we got better," the sounds of gunshots and cannons exploding one after the other could be heard behind Mustafa Kemal. "I want to congratulate you. You fought truly bravely on the path of union and progress. I heard that our two friends Silüet and Sesmi drank the sherbet of martyrdom. Is this true?" I couldn't swallow while licking my dry lips. "Home." "Yes, it is true, Mustafa Kemal Pasha." He covered the phone receiver with his hand and sighed in distress. "Thanks to the homeland." While his deep voice echoed in my ears, I added in my calm voice, "Thanks to the homeland." I gripped the phone's receiver tightly while lowering my gaze helplessly. The enemy has begun to withdraw not only from Aksahir, but also from the Dardanelles and the fronts. The Sultan's escape ruined all his plans, and a tough and brutal war is going on here. The soil smells of blood, the air smells of gunpowder, the sea loses its original blue and turns red. Ereburnu and Konkbayeri are becoming ours one by one. Martyrs lie here wherever we step. The gloomy clouds have dispersed, Mr. Rauf. A land whose soil smells of blood is now preparing to become this nation's again. His voice trembled as he explained, and he couldn't swallow for a while. While Mustafa Kemal was explaining, my eyes filled with tears and I gripped the phone receiver tighter. "May God help us, my Pasha. May victory be ours." I got goosebumps as I imagined his steel blue eyes frowning under his blonde eyebrows. As the phone hung up with strange crackles, my fingers loosened from the handset and I slowly put the phone back down. When I turned back with calm eyes, all my friends were watching me with curious eyes. I swallowed hard as I scratched my head nervously with my hand. "What does Mustafa Kemal Pasha say, Rauf Pasha?" "The Battle of Gallipoli has escalated, but the enemy has now started to retreat." He said, "There were hundreds of thousands of martyrs and countless wounded. This place smells of blood. Mimitsik lies where we step. This time he is commanding the Kanakhel front. His job is difficult. May God help him." Enver's, Saysavar's, and Tullet's faces fell. As they lowered their gazes helplessly, they repeated in unison, "Amen, Rauf Pasha." I passed through them and quickly returned to my room. My tears were involuntarily flowing from my eyes and dripping from the tip of my nose. I pulled a piece of paper from the dusty Fisco next to the table and picked up my pen, which I had just dipped in its inkwell. Maybe I was late to reply to Erva, but I just found time in this war. Dear Irva, I am writing this letter without knowing that you will not be able to reach you. I read the letter you wrote to me with great pleasure. I learned that you were in Thessaloniki. You are a little far away, but you are always very close to me. Your breath is as close to me as the sound of my heartbeat. I was so worried that I wouldn't receive a letter from you. I neither enjoyed the food I ate nor the drink I drank. Do you know that the war is calming down and the despicable enemies are retreating? It turns out that this city is more beautiful when it is free. Now, when I hold your hand, look into your eyes, caress your hair, kiss your moist lips, I will enjoy this city. I started to feel the sweet scent coming from the linden trees. I left politics behind. After I emerge from this tired war as a heroic commander, what I will focus on will be your eyes and my novels. I will be interested in art from now on, Irva. Politics was a deep well whose end and end were unknown. I didn't like corridors. I was always in favor of what was clear and open. You know, you wrote in the other letter, you come here, we will live here. Yes, I will come. I will end this bitter war and bring Aksahir and our country back to their free days. I will come to you without caring about anything. I never knew whether I loved you or whether I loved you, but I was sure that I was madly in love with you. It's almost time. Most of it is gone. A few are left. Irva, I look forward to the day when we meet you and never part again. Maybe you don't know, but you have been very good for my soul. I loved you in despair, in pain, in despair, in sadness, and in this war. Maybe love was beautiful, but it was as difficult as it was beautiful. Irva. Ralph. The pen was coming and going so fast in my hand that I wanted to write letters full of pages to Irva, but I only had enough time for this much. With tearful eyes, I folded my letter and put it in my pocket. When I opened the door to my room, I felt a pain in my heart when I saw Fuet's desk and Sesme's room empty. As I was walking downstairs with lazy steps, Sesavar, who was warming her hands by the stove in the lobby, heard my footsteps and looked at me with her worried eyes. He was still warming his hands, but when he saw me coming, he pulled himself together. As he walked towards her, he stroked his curly mustache above his lips and adjusted his red fez with tassels on his head and said, "Hello, Ralph Pasha." As I said, "Hello, Sesavar," I stepped towards the door of the headquarters. Just as I was about to exit the door, one of the recruits corrected his rifle hanging on his shoulder and called out to me. "Ralph Potham." Ralph Potham. "Sir," I said, putting my hands in my pockets and burying my head in my furry-collared coat. "Aksahir Sultanasai teacher Ahmet Robinson has arrived." The tone in his voice did not satisfy me. What happened? What did he say? His eyebrows furrowed and his forehead wrinkled. "My Pasha asked you to visit the school tomorrow morning, but he didn't want to go see you when you were tired, but he said he was definitely waiting." When he finished his words, I was about to turn around, but he remembered something and continued. "Pasha, his face was not very good. He looked like he was tired, like he was upset about something, and his eyes were quite swollen." After listening to what the soldier said with wide eyes, I nodded, trying to remain calm, and added, "Okay, I will go tomorrow morning." We started walking side by side when we came face to face with Sesavar. I missed walking safely through the streets of this city with my best friend. This city was more beautiful when it was free, Sesavar. He smiled bitterly and sighed. "If freedom coincides with spring, it is more beautiful, Ralph Pasha." He was trying to warm up by putting his dry and bony fingers into his pocket. The sun was shining in the sky, saying goodbye to the streets of Aksahir through the mountains and giving heat only to melt the snow. We took steps accompanied by the sound of melting snow. I watched the red sky of Aksahir with my misty eyes and let out the air that had accumulated in my lungs. Do you know what I regret most? My eyes filled with tears as I swallowed hard, saying goodbye to this city. Sesavar asked with a grimace while looking at me meaningfully. "Saying goodbye? Pasha, what do you say? What does your mouth say?" Clasping my lower lip and upper lip together, I turned my troubled gaze to my boots crushing the hardening snow. "Yes, Sesavar, to say goodbye. Once the war is over, I will go to Thessaloniki." "What will you do, Pasha, in Thessaloniki? Didn't you say, I don't want to die anywhere other than Aksahir?" Frowning my eyebrows mockingly. "Who said I would die there, Sesavar? And you killed us and put us in the grave, huh?" I said, laughing out loud. While her cheeks were turning red, she licked her lips shyly. No, Ralph Pasha, I didn't mean that. how much you love this city. Stop, stop, I'm joking, Sasevar. The situation is different from what you know. I read Irva's letter that you brought to me the other day. Irva was in Thessaloniki. He intervened with his eyes widening. Is he in Thessaloniki right now? Yes, he was in Thessaloniki. He wrote to me in his letter and said, "Come here, we will continue our life with you here." While we were desperately silent, not much noise could be heard other than our breathing and the fluttering of the snow as it melted. This news made me very sad, Ralph Pasha, but it is our duty to support you in a decision that makes you happy. We'll see each other often again, right, Pasha? I patted his back while frowning. I guess I'll see you later, Sasevar. So what? Am I going to delete you from my life while leaving you behind? Sometimes you're ridiculous, huh? While looking at each other with bitter smiles, we were walking arm in arm on the increasingly dark streets of Aksahir. Love is such a strange feeling, Ralph Pasha, especially in the midst of war. It's like dreaming of the impossibility. You are dying to meet him, but you doubt your life. But despite everything, you love him madly. This is what love should be, my Pasha. Love should not be underestimated. Love should not be seen as something simple. On the contrary, in this war full of pain and brutality, one should look at his smiling face and stay away from grief, even for a short time. As he spoke, his misty eyes looked far away, and his lips smiled helplessly. My hand reached into my cigarette case in my inner pocket. I took out 2 cigarettes and handed one to Sasevar. Sasevar, who tried not to buy it every time, this time took one of the cigarettes without any objection and placed it between her dry lips. While putting the plate in my pocket, I lit his cigarette with my lighter. I breathed the smoke out as I inhaled it into my lungs. You smoked too much during this war, Ralph, I thought to myself. Is your love of war too? Her cheeks turned red as she looked away from me. While blowing out the smoke from his cigarette, he said, Yes. Yes, my Pasha, it is a love affair left over from the war. I tried to look at his face as he tried to avoid me with his flashing eyes. Of course you will meet too. Was her name Maypear? Yes, Ralph Pasha, Maypear. I smiled as I pushed my wire-rimmed glasses, which were fogging up as I breathed, onto my nose. Free days are near, gloomy clouds are dispersing, I said as our steps accelerated. As he was returning from the wall of the Grand Mosque, he was looking at me with curious eyes, one of his eyebrows raised. What happened, Sasevar? Something came to my mind, Pasha. I frowned suspiciously as I took a deep breath. What is on your mind? Well, my Pasha. What will happen to the Committee of Union and Progress? That is, will you continue on its political side after the war is over? As I took strong breaths, my chest swelled as much as possible. My thoughtful eyes wandered around the bay windows of Aksahir houses for a while. Actually, no. Sasevar was listening to me with excited eyes while stroking his curvy mustache. I know. I have a love of politics inside me that always restrains me. I have a revolutionary heart and a nationalist vein, but I made a promise to Irva. From now on, after this war, I will spend my time with Irva while devoting myself only to my novels. When I thought of Irva, a sweet smile spread on my lips again. Sasevar released her strong breaths as she bent her absent-minded gaze forward. Do you have a chance to come to Aksahir, Pasha? I nodded, curling my bottom lip outwards. No. I don't know, Sasevar. Everything depends on Irva. When I finished my words, I was touched while watching the narrow, colorful, and cheerful streets of Aksahir. Because we really wanted to be with you in a freer Aksahir when the war ended, Pasha, he said and fell silent, the tone of his voice gradually lowering. But good health, Ralph Pasha. One should live whatever makes a person happy. Anything else will make a person experience hell on earth. As I patted him on the shoulder in a friendly manner, it was time for us to leave. When I came to the beginning of the street where my house was located, I smiled at Sasevar. Come on, see you, Sasevar. Be careful. Take care of yourself too, Pasha. For a while, I watched with pleasure the sight of the melting snow accumulating in the stone gutter hanging from the courtyard wall of a house towards the street. Little sparrows sat in the stone trough, shaking the water with their tiny beaks and drinking heavily. I remembered that I was cold when the wind that blew from time to time caressed my thick and wavy hair and made my whole body shiver. I put my cap on my head, buried my head in my thick collared coat, and headed home quickly. The moment I entered the door of my red bay-windowed house, a deep peace spread over me. The smell of the books in my library mixed with the smell of ink and tobacco, while the intertwined smells licked my nose. My body was very tired and my eyelids were constantly curtaining my gaze. Before going to bed, I read a little book in the light of the pale oil lamp. As my head slowly fell on the book, I closed the book by placing a mark on the page I placed my finger on and threw myself onto my bed. I fell into a deep sleep, looking at the gloomy and dim light of the moonlight filtering through the tulle curtains into my room. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I opened my eyes as the compositions of the birds perched on the branches of the linden trees were faintly played into my ears. As the sun was shining in its place in the sky, I remembered that it was the first time I started a day so comfortably. I heaved up the snow-white quilt that had accumulated at my feet and pushed it aside. My mind was on Aksahir Sultanasai and Ahmet Robinson. When I got up from the bed, I ran to the left of the bay window. I opened the window by parting the colored blinds. The mild cold of the air, along with the sweet breeze, caressed my skin and occasionally brought the scent of geranium to my nose. Without wasting any time, I changed my clothes, covered the window, and drew the tulle curtain. When I threw myself into the streets of Aksahir, my heart was pounding. I felt weird because I didn't have a cap on my head, but the temperature no longer allowed it. While I was walking with fast steps, I heard an insistent voice calling towards me. Commander Ralph. Commander Ralph. While I was looking around with uneasy eyes, I saw a white-bearded old man looking at me from the bay window of his house. While he was moistening his pink lips under his cotton-like white beard, his bright eyes were looking at me. Sir, uncle, my lips curled into a smile. You are the commander of the Committee of Union and Progress, aren't you? As I moved my skeptical gaze over the white-bearded man, I added, home. Yes, uncle, I am Commander Ralph. He raised his hands to the sky and whispered something through his moist lips while wandering his eyes around the sky for a while. Then he frowned his white eyebrows and spoke in a caring tone. Oh God, may God be pleased with you, you and Mustafa Kemal Pasha. If it weren't for you, we would have handed over this country, our hometown Aksahir, to the traitors among us. I pray every night, and they keep calling you traitors. I smiled bitterly as my eyes got emotional and misty. I am proud to have you with us, uncle. We repelled the enemy thanks to the support of our valuable people. Let me not keep you. May God make it easy, he said. While his lips under his white beard were smiling, he entered the bay window and closed the shutters. Continuing the proud smile on my lips, I quickly walked towards the Sultan. As the snow melted, Aksahir was turning green, its trees were blooming, and the tart scent of lindens was everywhere. It made me so happy to see our own people instead of seeing occupying soldiers on the streets. Do not discriminate, Almighty Mevla, I muttered through my teeth. When I arrived in front of Aksahir Sultanasai's building, the sound of the noon adhan was heard from Khalisi Mosque, and the occasional laughter of the students accompanied the adhan from some of the open windows of the school. While looking at the historical building's decorations and wooden-framed windows, I slipped through the door. While a pleasant smell of wood was licking my nose, I went up the stairs to Ahmet Robinson. 2 classes started their education, and the students added color to the Sultani by wearing their uniforms. I stood in front of Manager Namik Bey's door, took deep breaths, and slowly knocked on the large embroidered door. Come, a deep and still voice echoed. As I opened the door and crept in with lazy steps, Mr. Namik forced a smile at me as he sat up from the chair he was sitting on. Come on, Mr. Ralph. Was it you? I thought they were students. Shaking my head, I first greeted Mr. Namik, and then I greeted Ahmet Robinson, who was sitting on the chairs in front of the table with tearful eyes. While Ahmet Robinson was licking the thin mustache under his nose with his lips, tears were streaming down his eyes. I slowly sat down on one of the chairs pointed out by Mr. Namik. Goodbye, friends. You're a little sluggish. Ahmet Robinson couldn't swallow while interlocking his fingers between his legs. There was a meaningless and deep silence in the room. While I frowned and watched Namik with meaningful eyes, Namik averted his gaze from me and watched out of the school window. It would be better if you learn it yourself, Ralph Pasha, he said, handing me the paper he took from Namik's desk. At that moment, the door opened and Mr. Rommel, the school's German teacher, entered with his blazing blue eyes. He was about to say something, but when he saw me he fell silent. He crossed his hands in front of his suspenders as he sat down on the chair next to me. My lips were dry as I swallowed hard and opened the folded telegram paper. My eyes started to move excitedly between the small letters that resembled Ant. To Aksahir Sultanasai. As we left behind a painful and bloody battle, thank God, we repelled the enemy. But this was never easy. These lands were watered with blood. These lands smell of blood. These lands are now holy lands. For this reason, the Turkish nation was again tired, but they never left the front idle and resisted until their last drop of blood. I admired their words, "May our lives and our blood be sacrificed, sir," their upright stance, their never being afraid, their desire to say goodbye to their loved ones and take their last breaths at the front rather than in the arms of their loved ones, and their unique friendship. It was so obvious that they were the grandchildren of Nasred and Haja that even in these impossibilities and pain, the smile never left their lips that were dry from thirst. I was a little harsh on them, and they expressed this in the article they wrote to you. I tried to be their older brother rather than their commander at the front, and I treated them in the warmest way in foreign lands. I loved them very much. Tariq, Fizi, Arif, and many more. They were so brave that one night before going to bed, Tariq said to me, "My hand should hold both a pin and a rifle. As long as this blood is in this vein, this soul is in this body, we will not let those infidels in here, sir." I appreciated it. Undoubtedly, Ahmet Robinson's teacher had a lot of support in his ability to endure these difficult conditions. "I kiss your hands, teacher. It is not easy to raise such a brave man. I talked to my commander Ralph before coming to this front. My Pasha has a heart of courage. Maybe if you appreciate me, you should know that we take him as an example too," he would say. This homeland was watered with blood. It was not easily won. Fortunately, the clouds have dispersed and a bright future awaits our country. Big-hearted students of Aksahir Sultanasai, brave-hearted Mimitsik of our front, Tariq, Fizi, Arif, and others were martyred. They were saying, "Let our lives and blood be sacrificed for this country." Yes, children, your blood watered the soil. You wrote a real epic by leaving your own half-stories. Fevzi Pasha. As I put the paper back on Namik's desk, my tears were dripping from my nose to my lips. While stroking his sparse blonde hair, Rommel looked at Ahmet Robinson with his burning blue eyes and asked in a trembling voice, Is this true?" "That's right, Mr. Rommel, that's right." He clasped his dry and bony fingers together inseparably and sighed in distress. I was sobbing inside. I stood up from the chair I was sitting on while wiping my tears with the square embroidered handkerchief I took out of my pocket. "Ahmet Robinson, will you come with me? We're going to go to class." He quickly jumped up and tried to wipe his red eyes with the back of his hand. He came after me saying, Okay, Ralph Pasha." When we left the room, I started walking towards the classroom at the end of the corridor. The bitter murmurs of silence echoed in the wooden corridors of the school. The joy of the students had disappeared, and the pale-colored wooden walls were closing in on me, suffocating me. I stood in front of the classroom door and read the text 11A written on the golden table with misty eyes. Then Ahmet Robinson opened the door and entered. After the students stood up out of respect with sullen faces, they all sat down at their desks again upon Ahmet Robinson's signal, clasping their fingers on the wooden desk and lowering their eyes. "Good morning, friends." While Ahmet Robinson was saying with his voice gradually falling, there was still deep silence in the classroom. While the students were looking up at me from time to time, I passed by Ahmet Robinson and took the attendance list from the table. I couldn't control my tears when I saw the names that were not among us. When I looked up from the list and looked at the spaces in the row of names, I couldn't swallow. "No. I'll take attendance, guys." "Understood, Ralph Pasha," said the curly-haired student sitting in the front row. 300 Tariqs. "Here." The students shouted in unison. 301 Fizi. "Here." 302 Sali. "Here." While their powerful babblings made the class groan, the echoing sound made my heart ache. 303 Arif. "Here." "They are here. They live in our hearts. They sacrificed their lives and blood. Thank the country." As I brought my hand to my mouth, I helplessly left the attendance sheet what with my tears on the table and quickly walked out of the classroom. As I was walking down the corridor illuminated by the dusty sunlight filtering through the windows, Ahmet Robinson shouted after me, Ralph Pasha, wait. Please go back to your lesson, Mr. Ahmet," I said and ran without even looking back. We met Rommel at the exit door. He could barely stand while wiping his blue eyes with the handkerchief in his hand. After he greeted me with his eyes red from crying, I left the Sultan's door. I was walking quickly while my tears curtained my misty eyes. The cold wind was hitting my face like a slap in the face after the sun. While I was sniffling and trying to relax, I felt in my pocket. The letter I wrote to Ervo was just sitting in my pocket. On my way to the Western headquarters, I was going to stop by the post office and give the letter. As I entered the door of the post office, I caught sight of the bald and fat clerk behind the counter, looking at me with determined eyes from under his bone glasses. "Good luck," I said, not paying much attention to my swollen and red eyes. "Thanks." While placing the cigarette in his hand on the ashtray next to him, he turned his gaze back to the pile of papers in front of him. The damp walls of the post office left an intense and unbearable odor inside. As the smell of inkwell and paper wafted into my nose, I continued, looking into the amber eyes of the fat post office worker under his glasses. I said, "I want to send this letter to this address in Thessaloniki," and told him the address Ervo sent. The chubby employee, well past middle age, scratched the beard that had just begun to appear on his face and said, "Okay, do you have anything else to add?" He took the envelope lying on the counter and placed it among the others. No, thank you, good luck." When I left the post office, which smelled of humidity and moisture, I took a breath of the fresh air outside and set out towards the headquarters. *****. When I entered the door of the headquarters with my lips in a straight line and my face sullen, my friends quickly stood up from the wing chairs where they were sitting in the lobby. While everyone's eyes were wide open, they took on a relieved expression. "Rauf Pasha, where are you? We were very curious about you." My calm face remained calm as I said, "I'm here. I just had some work to do. I took care of it." While Tullet was adjusting his red fez and smoothing the wrinkled parts of his broadcloth uniform, he said with excitement, "I wish you had informed me, Pasha. You made us very worried. The enemy has withdrawn from Aksahir, but the danger is not over," he said. "That doesn't matter." Enver's eyebrows furrowed and his broad forehead wrinkled. "What's wrong, Pasha?" With a careless attitude, I sat on one of the red velvet-covered armchairs in the lobby. While I was taking a breather, I pointed to the empty armchairs with my hand. "Come sit down, let me tell you." While my friends were sitting on the wing chairs with excitement, their curious eyes were wandering over me. "What happened, Pasha?" I lifted my head up to the ceiling and tried hard not to cry as I tried to relax. "I went to Aksahir Sultanasai this morning. Yesterday, Ahmet Robinson invited me and told me that he would tell me something important. So I went to Aksahir Sultanasai first thing in the morning. Everyone was very calm. When I entered the room, Ahmet Robinson and manager Namik were sitting with tearful eyes. I sat for a while, then the German teacher Rommel came and sat next to me. Ahmet Robinson gave me the letter from Fevzi Pasha from the Kanakhale front. After saying this, I remained silent and lowered my gaze to the ground. "What was written in that letter, Pasha?" While Enver's eyes widened with excitement, he moistened his lips under his sweaty mustache. Aksahir Sultanasai students who became soldiers in the army were martyred. While I was out of breath, all my friends' faces turned pale. I swallowed hard as I tilted my head forward. "Thanks to the homeland." Seysavar looked at me with her red and teary eyes. "Of course, thanks to the homeland. The young bodies had big hearts," he said, and now only the crackling of the burning stove in the lobby could be heard. As I stood up from the armchair I was sitting on and went up the stairs, my friends slowly followed me with their pale faces. When I entered my room and closed the door, I saw my nearly finished novel and my dusty black typewriter staring at me. I didn't feel like writing. I couldn't even be happy about the cleansing of the homeland. I placed my hand on the edge of the window and watched out of the window silently for a while. While my eyes were looking at the silhouetted shops of Arasta Bazaar, I tried to turn on the radio. My door was knocked by a gentle hand. "You can come." I didn't even turn around. I quickly wiped away the tears that started to flow again. "Rauf Pasha, it's me, Enver." "Come, Enver, come." I let out the air I had filled my lungs with distress. "Are you sorry for the children, Pasha?" Tarek's and Fizi's looks came to my mind again. "Home." "Yes, Enver. I feel sorry for their brave hearts." "It's very sad, Rauf Pasha. It's very sad. But it's proud." Even a little high school student couldn't think about himself, his mother, or his loved ones while there was war in his country. These brave children of the homeland went to war without blinking an eye. "That's right, Enver. but people can't accept it. I kept silent. As the sun smiled through the green and white mountains, I saw the silhouette of Enver's sad face in the glass reflecting the light. You are going to leave the Committee of Union and Progress, Pasha. There was a deep silence at that time. I clenched my teeth and curled my fingers into fists as I straightened the collars of my uniform. Yes, I will let it go, Enver. Why will you leave it, Pasha? As his sad voice echoed in my ears, I turned around helplessly. He was standing in the middle of the room with his hands clasped together. I stepped next to him, making squeaks on the wooden floor made by my boots. I continued my speech while stroking my curly mustache. The state is like a sea of secrets. The secrets hidden at the bottom of this sea are darker than even the corridors of the earth. While Enver was looking away from me in embarrassment, he moved his lips under his mustache and added in his low voice, "So you don't want to be in this darkness, Pasha." That's right, Enver. Now I want to be interested in art and write novels. I don't want to be a part of the secrets at the bottom of this sea of secrets. My heart is still the heart of a revolutionary. There is still a member of the Committee of Union and Progress inside me, but a passive member, I said, while my lips curled and smiled. Enver also smiled bitterly out of helplessness and sadness. You are right, Rauf Pasha. You are very right. How is your new novel going, Pasha? My amber eyes glistened in the sun as I cast my somber gaze over the novel. It is almost over, and when the war calms down, I will put an end to the novel and go to Thessaloniki. Enver raised his eyebrows as he looked like a fish out of water. To Thessaloniki? I was smiling when I said, yes, to Thessaloniki. What will you do, Rauf Pasha, in Thessaloniki? I smiled involuntarily as I whispered from the corner of my lips. Erva. Erva was in Thessaloniki. Have you learned where Erva Hanım is, Pasha? Yes, Enver said this in his last letter. I will go to Thessaloniki from now on. While she moisturized her lips, which were dry from tension, her cheeks turned red and her eyes watered. What a nice feeling, Pasha, to have someone waiting for you after these bad days. I hope your love will be the light of your heart for a lifetime. Enver looked away from me with his misty eyes. What kind of words are that, Enver? Behind a brave-hearted soldier like you, there is the mountainous commander Rauf, and even if he is a martyr, you still have friends who you are sure love you. This promise did not happen now. I had a very bad father, Rauf Pasha. I saw all the cruelty and evil from him, but he had only one good side. The only good thing about a bad father is that he teaches you to be a good father. My father also taught me how to be a good father, he said, covering his face with his palms and sobbing inwardly. I am always your father, Enver, your spiritual father, your older brother. Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It's an intense outburst of emotion after a heavy war, Rauf Pasha. He forced a smile while wiping his tears. Taking his chin in my hands, I caressed his head, hugged him, ignoring his tobacco-smelling breath. Then, as if he didn't want to disturb me, he slipped out of my arms and left the room, wiping his eyes. As I desperately returned to my desk, I felt my heart and soul being squeezed. With misty eyes, I took my typewriter in front of me and completed the lines I had been planning for months, but the novel was still continuing. When I lifted up the paper, I felt my eyes hurt and my fingertips went numb. While I was leaning back on the chair and trying to relax, I was startled by a loud sound hitting the glass. As I sat up in fear, I looked out the window. While the branches of the trees on the roadside were shaking as if they were breaking, the red-tiled roofs of the houses were almost ready to fly away. While the dust raised by the wind was blowing in the air, a gray-orange color dominated Aksahir. Stones flying from the ground were hitting the windows. This bitter wind, which visits Aksahir every spring, knocked on our door again. While the wind was blowing with all its strength, whistling sounds were echoing on the walls of the building. As the evening approached, I quickly grabbed my coat and cap from the hanger and got ready. The thin glass was shaking as the wooden sills hit the glass. As the wind accelerated, the sounds heard increased, and it became more difficult to see. I slipped out of my room and hurried down the stairs, greeting my friends. Friends, good evening. I am going home now, but there is no problem, right? Saysavar, freed from her fez and straightening her wavy hair, spoke. No, Rauf Pasha, good evening to you. I put my hands in the pockets of my cashmere coat and headed home quickly. The wind was seeping under my coat, making my whole body shiver. He even moved my cap and shook my hair, As I was heading towards my house, the wind blowing against me was pushing and dragging me, making my steps difficult. I felt relieved when I saw my house with its red bay window at the end of the narrow and crushed stone street. Red tiles flying from the roofs with the force of the wind were scattered randomly on the street. I hurriedly threw myself inside. After taking off my cashmere coat and cap, I quickly climbed the stairs. After throwing wood into the fireplace and lighting it, I changed my clothes. The night was already half over. The wind blowing outside was getting stronger, and the dried branches of the tree that had just started to bloom were hitting the bay window. I slowly threw myself onto my bed, my eyelids curtaining my gaze. While the crackling and sweet red of the fire coming from the fireplace hit my face, it was accompanied by the gloomy moonlight filtering through the tulle curtain. I closed my eyes and was about to fall asleep when I heard clicking sounds. Considering the strength of the wind and my tiredness, I continued to lie down without even opening my eyes. Just as I pulled the covers over me and lay down on the bed, the sound got louder and a pair of hands wrapped around my throat. When my breath suddenly stopped, I opened my eyes in fear. A tall Greek soldier with blonde hair and blue eyes was squeezing my throat. While he was trying to hit his hand, saying, "Stop. Stop. Stop," he was squeezing it harder each time. As the tumult of the orange fire from the fireplace reflected in her bright blue eyes, it brought a bitter smile to her pink lips. "You will die, Ralph. You have no escape now. You will die." I tried to sit up while the pain was in my throat. The sweat flowing from my neck wetted my back. While his face looked like a silhouette, he was thrusting into my throat with all his strength. I stuck my tongue out and retched hard. His tobacco-smelling breath made me sick. While my face was red and my eyes were watering, I took the glass cup from the nightstand and put it on his head. The cold was pouring in from the door of the house. I was trying to collect myself by taking strong breaths as I turned to him indifferently. He collapsed to the ground covered in blood. While I was chanting, "R.A. Ralph, you are going to die," I fired the revolver I took out of my drawer, one after the other, on him. As the smell of blood mixed with the smell of gunpowder, I looked at his face with hatred. When I looked through the dirty oval mirror, my throat was bruised, almost black. Dirty and thick blood splashed on me as I kicked the lifeless body of the Greek soldier. While I was about to drink a glass of water to calm my anxiety, I sat up from my bed, drenched in sweat. My eyes quickly scanned my side, but there were neither Greek soldiers nor the blood of Greek soldiers. I had a terrible nightmare. After checking my throat, I stood up, lifting the snow-white sheet at my feet. While the sun was shining in the sky, the tart scent emanating from the linden trees was mixing with the scent of geranium coming from the depths of the steppe. I stepped towards my closet with my eyes burning brightly. I pulled my suitcase aside and swallowed hard. I quickly opened my closet and stuffed all my clothes into the pale suitcase in front of me. While I was quickly throwing my belongings towards the suitcase, a note paper flew out from under my cashmere scarf, which I wore every time I went to Erva. While I was putting the cashmere scarf on the suitcase, I bent down on my knees and picked up the tightly folded note paper from the floor. My fingers parting the paper were shaking. My eyes quickly began to read the dried and faded ink on the paper. "See this note as late as possible, okay? Because I'm leaving this note inside that fragrant cashmere scarf without your knowledge." While writing this note, the pain of my heart, the moisture of my tears, and the desperation of my lips passed through the lines. "I could never love war, Ralph. It always took me away from my loved ones. Just like from you." Pain penetrated my heart. Despair became a part of my life. But suddenly you appeared before me, as if you were giving hope to Erva, as if you were wiping Erva's tears. "I'm leaving, Ralph. I'll go far away, but I have no doubt that I will always be in your heart. My heart cannot stand the war. My heart cannot bear the fire that burns and grows on my country. I will miss you more than anything and anyone. I know how much you love Axa, but I will be waiting for you wherever I go. See this note as soon as possible, okay? Will you see when the war ends and spring comes to my country, when the trees bloom, when the scent of geranium and linden fills the streets of Axa, when the smell of blood disappears from the soil and the smell of gunpowder dissipates? Be sure of this. I love you, now and in the future. Erva." These lines squeezed my soul again as I sat helplessly on the edge of my bed with messy sheets. While sobbing and taking deep breaths, I watched out of my window with the shutters wide open. He had announced that he was going, but I could not see him. It was exactly as you said. "Erva, look." When the flowers bloomed and the scent of linden and geranium surrounded the streets of Axahir, when the smell of blood disappeared and the smell of gunpowder dissipated, I saw your note, I thought with distress. I closed the suitcase with difficulty as I folded the paper and put it on top of my overstuffed suitcase. I closed the door of my empty closet with misty eyes. As my bare and strong feet pounded the wooden floor, I stood in front of the middling library at the corner of my house. My hand reached for the crime and punishment novel that Irva gave me, which was at the top, and I put it in my other bag while blowing on the dust on its shiny black cover. Then, with a quick hand move, I emptied the entire library. My eyes filled with tears as I closed my suitcase containing my books. I looked with tearful eyes at my gradually dying fireplace from last night, my faded shutters, and the table where I drank my rabbit blood tea and wrote my novel. As the dusty bunch of lights filtering through the tulle curtains hit the very center of my house, I sat up from the end of my bed without sitting down any further. I took my suitcases and typewriter and went downstairs quickly. The wind that was blowing last night had calmed down and turned the area into a war zone. As I descended the wooden steps, I remembered that it was the last time I walked down these steps and set foot in this lobby for the last time. The dim light was shining into the stairwell of my house from the small window on the edge of the wooden door. As I looked at myself in the mirror right behind the armchair, I saw that my under eyes were bruised and my wavy hair parted in the middle was turning white in places. A smile came to my lips as I adjusted the collar of my uniform. As I pulled up my trousers, the wide legs of which were squeezed by my boots, I felt a gap in my waist. My hand felt through the gap on my waist and into my pocket right above my heart. My gun, Irva's letters, and handkerchief. I went upstairs with confused eyes and opened the drawer of the bedside table. I quickly took my metal-handled revolver, Irva's gauze handkerchief, and the letters, and hugged them like a mother reunited with her babies. Without wasting any time, I looked around my room one last time, quickly went down the steps, grabbed my belongings, and slipped out the door. While the heat of the sun was licking my skin from below, I grimaced with the sunlight hitting my face. As the lock sounds echoed on the door of my house, I knew that maybe I had locked this door for the last time. I went down the stone steps and looked around my house with its red bay window. From now on, Commander Ralph's house will be filled with deep silence, I whispered. I put my belongings in the car that resembled a pile of scrap in front of the door and sat helplessly behind the wheel. When I started the car, I moved forward by gently touching the gas pedal under my foot, while the fumes from the exhaust surrounded the crushed stone street. As we got to the end of the street, the house got smaller and smaller. While my fingers were tightly wrapped around the steering wheel, the tears flowing from my eyes were dripping from the tip of my nose onto my faded trousers. The scrap car made a clanking noise and proceeded through the crushed stone streets of Axahir. *****. When my car stopped in front of Garp Hotel, its engine stalled. Without making any change, I got out of the car, grabbed my belongings, and walked into the garden. While marble tables and wire chairs surrounded the garden, the building with a pale blue facade was shining with all its beauty. As I walked in, dragging the heavy suitcases in my hands and opening the white door of the building, a pleasant smell hit my nose. In the hotel lobby, nothing could be heard other than the sound of ticking clocks. "Welcome, sir," whispered the tall man with short hair sitting behind the information desk. "Nice?" "I found it nice. Do you have a spare room?" I was scanning the building with my gaze, trying to force a smile. "Yes, we even have one last room," he said. As my eyes rolled out of their sockets and the wartime was just settling down, I wanted to ask where this crowd was coming from, but I couldn't. As I shook my head helplessly, I tried to hold my typewriter and its bag tighter. "Okay, I'll take that room then." The tall man stood up from the chair he was sitting on, took the last key from the white-framed cabinet behind him, and ran up the steps. I came out after him, adjusting the cap on my head. While admiring the embroidered motifs of Nasred and Haja and Siyat Mamet Hayrani on the walls, I walked through the corridor illuminated by the dim gas lamps hanging on the walls. The man stood in front of the door of the room at the end of the corridor and looked into my eyes. "This is your room, sir. Do you want me to help you?" While I was looking attentively at my room with the sign 12 on the door, I grabbed the key he handed me from between his fingers. "Thank you. I'll handle it." The hotel clerk straightened his crooked cap while straightening the collar of his loose shirt. "Have a good rest, sir." I just chose to smile. When I opened the door with the key, I entered my spacious room. After closing the door behind me, I left my suitcases and typewriter aside and opened the tulle curtains of the room. While the sound of the curtains sliding from the cornices filled my ears, bright sunlight flooded into the room. When I checked the time on the leather strap watch on my wrist, I realized that I had to go to the headquarters before it was too late. Taking the risk of putting my suitcases, which were just staring at me, in place later, I left my room, slipped out of the lobby, and got behind the wheel. While the old vehicle, whose engine was making strange noises, was sending black smoke into the streets of Ateş, I headed towards the headquarters. ****. The western headquarters was in deep silence. While Ateş shopkeepers were just opening their shutters, the noon call to prayer was recited as if echoing on the statue walls. I greeted the soldiers working at his desk and quickly climbed up. All my friends were seated on the red-winged chairs in front of my room, engrossed in deep conversation. Silüet, who was facing me, stood up with his burning eyes and greeted me. Seeing his seriousness, Enver and Sasevar quickly stood up from where they were sitting. "Hello, friends." "Hello, Rauf Pasha," said Sasevar, while getting ready. "I came to your house, but the shutters and windows were closed. The curtains were tightly drawn. The doors were locked." While looking at Sasevar with all seriousness, I moistened my dry lips with my tongue. I moved away from my house a little bit, because I really needed to rest my mind. "So what, Pasha? Where did you go?" "To the hotel," I said, while maintaining my calm tone. "I will stay at the Garb Hotel for a while, finish my novel there, and go to Thessaloniki when the war calms down." Silüet asked with curious eyes while straightening his straight hair, which looked dark under the bright light. "But why, Pasha?" I smiled bitterly and approached them with lazy steps. Because that house left me with bad memories. I started having nightmares most nights. I felt very bad when I remembered that I missed Erva even more. That's why I thought somewhere away from home would be good, and I checked into the hotel this morning. They all remained speechless as they lowered their embarrassed gazes in front of them. "As you feel good, my Pasha," said Enver, while scratching his mustache. As I left them behind and walked towards my room, I watched them out of the corner of my eye. "Don't stand there. Come in," I said, as I opened the door to my room. As they all got up from the red velvet armchairs they were sitting on, they entered my room with forced smiles on their lips. Instead of sitting in my own swivel chair, I sat down on one of the chairs in front of my desk. While Sasevar's amber eyes were wandering over me, she raised her eyebrows and asked excitedly, "Rauf Pasha, you told us something when the war started. Is it still valid?" I looked at his face as if I didn't understand, frowned my eyebrows and said with my flashing eyes, "What did I tell you?" I asked. While Enver, Sasevar, and Silüet looked at each other and smiled, Enver stroked his curly mustache and said, "In the days when our ranks and duties were first reduced, you said, 'Don't call me commander anymore. I'm not a commander anymore.' Now that Vahdettin escaped to England by ship and lost in front of the nation in the Union and Progress, you are the commander again. We can now call you commander." When Enver finished his words, while they were laughing among themselves, my lips curled up and my eyes sparkled. Of course you can say. Together, we dispersed the clouds of gloom over our country. I cannot be proud enough for your bravery in this homeland revolution under my leadership. We are proud of you, Mustafa Kemal Pasha, and the beloved Turkish nation, Commander Rauf. While their faces were smiling under their red fezzes, Silüet's face calmed down, and this time he took the floor. "Rauf, Commander, I am glad that I served with you on the path of union and progress as a revolutionary who burns with the love of the country, instead of being an officer of the Istanbul government. I was honored and proud to be your brother in arms in this war." Silüet interlocked his fingers between his legs while biting his lips. My heart was also hurt by my revolutionary friends who were martyred and the students who sacrificed their lives on the Çanakkale front. "Pasha." While everyone in the environment fell into deep silence, the expressions on our faces dropped. I tried to stay calm by just taking strong breaths. As I moved my bright eyes over my friends, I spoke as if pouring water into my heart. "Can we have a coffee?" After examining each other with their shining eyes under their eyebrows, Enver said on behalf of all of them, "Okay, Pasha, we can't say no to a coffee. Besides, where will we drink coffee with you again?" he said, the sound of his voice gradually disappearing. "Enver, you are really being shameful. We will see you again, of course, The phone will not be in the hands of enemy forces, I said, bringing a forced smile to my lips. You are right, Ralph Pasha, but the heart cannot stand, sometimes, unusual experiences and dreams. As he leaned back in the chair he was sitting on, he blinked his still eyes repeatedly to prevent his tears. I called out with my misty voice. Excuse me? The door to my room slowly opened, and the young private looked inside with his shy eyes while adjusting his fez. Come on, Ralph Pasha? Can you bring us black coffee? He countered us with his eyes squinted from the bright sun filtering through my room's window. Okay, Ralph Pasha, he is coming right away. When the door closed again, Tullet broke the silence. When will you finish this novel you wrote, Pasha? I locked myself in the hotel. I guess it will be over in a week, I said, smiling. Enver said excitedly as he stepped forward on his chair. A novel written by a brave commander in a difficult war must be exquisite, isn't it? Ralph Pasha said. I smiled bitterly as I put my hands on my knees. It was nice, but nice, I said and looked into everyone's eyes. Let's celebrate this. What do you say? Saysavar's eyes sparkled as if they were ready from yesterday. Okay, Pasha, it would be great. Tullet interrupted her while she was straightening her hair. But where will we celebrate? I smiled from the corner of my lips as I tidied up my hair, parted in the middle, and pushed my wire-rimmed glasses onto my nose. At Garp Hotel, Saysavar was smiling. Is tomorrow suitable? It is appropriate, Ralph Pasha, it is appropriate, said Enver, while stroking his curly mustache with his trembling, dry, and bony fingers. When the young soldier brought our coffee, there was also a hard double-roasted Turkish delight from the war period. We enjoyed the coffee. Fourth day noon. Good day, Eva. I am writing these letters to you from a small hotel room where I am locked up. I left the Western headquarters as a tired commander in the war and found myself as a writer pressing the keys of his typewriter within the plain walls of the Garp Hotel. It is so difficult to bury sesame in feud. Irva, I cannot explain this to you. Even if my revolutionary friends leave me, life somehow flows and finds its way. Once again, at noon, I took the pen in my hand, and I am writing these lines to you from in front of the hotel window. The snow melted, and the scent of the linden trees mixed with the scent of geraniums and washed all over the streets. Juicy cherries blushed on green branches. I don't know, I'm not sure, but this is my last letter before I meet you. I longed for a city that I had never seen and never knew. Just because you existed, I didn't know if love was such a precious thing. Maybe I learned love from Grandma Paloma. Love is difficult. Loving is difficult. Being loved is difficult, my child. It takes effort. If butterflies fly in your soul while looking into a girl's eyes and caressing her hair, fight that pain in your heart, just like you fight the enemy on the homeland. Fight, because of course you will be the winner of this war of love, Grandma Paloma used to say. I agree with Emerva. I fought 2 wars for our love. I wish you knew her too. Her hair is so soft that I feel like I'm a bird in the sky when I hug her. My beautiful baby, my beautiful Irva, he always sings about you. Look, Grandma Paloma, I told Irva about you. While turning the paper towards her, she caressed her cotton-like white hair, which she had braided on both sides. Oh my dear, I would love to see Irva too, but I guess my life will not be enough. But you tell her, she is a very lucky girl. She will be Ralph's distinguished wife. She will be the wife of a writer. May your love be as beautiful as wine, my dear. I kissed her plump and soft hands and hugged her tightly. His bright eyes under his eyebrows, like white lines, were filled with tears. Don't say that, Grandma Paloma. You will definitely see Irva. Besides, when we go to Thessaloniki, we can take a nice photo and send it to you, okay? He cleaned my parted hair from my forehead and placed a kiss on my forehead with his moist lips. I guess I'll wait. I'll keep it in the best possible way, she said, her voice trembling. I regained my belief in love with Grandma Paloma. Because if he spends his time waiting in this hotel for a dead wife, just because he has a memory and he will come, love is not a simple pleasure carried by the body, but hoping for the despair that is engraved in his soul. She was smiling so beautifully that the fact that she had experienced pain made even the smile on her lips more beautiful. She hung her husband's uniform and her own tulle dress side by side, constantly caressing them with tearful eyes, and she was getting emotional. I took him away from his stress and sadness a little, but I know that he would neither give up on loving nor this hopeless waiting. I will tell Eva about you too. I'm sure she will love you too. He took my face in his palm with his chubby and trembling hands, caressed my stringy hair, and looked into my eyes. May the sparkle in your eyes never go away. May Erva always take the most beautiful place on the edge of your beautiful heart. Love is a beautiful emotion. Missing is a beautiful emotion. It makes a person beautiful and special, but only when it is mutual. I swallowed hard as I breathed the lavender scent from her hair into my lungs. The tears flowing from my eyes soaked her cream-colored sweater drop by drop.